Legendary. How are we? How you doing?
GM, I'm doing excellent. I'm back from my vacation, back from 1 week of traveling in Spain, and I'm doing fine. How are you?
Really good. I really wanted to make sure this time someone gave me some feedback. I know we got some feedback last week that it was mostly good, but someone told me that I took 6 seconds after the podcast started to actually start speaking. So the first thing I wanted to do today was just make sure that I spoke immediately as the countdown finished. And I think I achieved that. So I'm pretty happy.
That's pretty good. How did you feel about the feedback that we got after our first episode?
Yeah, it was good. It was good, man. Like, I think people, uh, people really liked it. They thought it was kind of a nice, relaxed conversation. Um, yeah, it was pretty good feedback, right? What did people tell you?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited as well. Having people reaching out to me and saying that they really like the format of us, the two of us casually chatting and covering important stuff that's going on in the space on the one hand, and people actually caring about the podcast because it is rather long, almost an hour long, and was pretty motivating to get all that feedback. And of course, there's a couple of things it's a learning process that we'll be working on, improving the audio quality and stuff like that. But I don't know, I was very very grateful, very humbled to get all the feedback we got.
Yeah, me too. And it's cool to suddenly realize that people are listening in all different places. So obviously, I got some feedback from people here in London. Then you were sending me the feedback in German from people in, well, were they in Germany or Austria?
Both Germany and Austria, actually.
In Germany and Austria. Then I also had some people reach out from America. And then also it was cool that it's not just necessarily the audio conversation we're getting feedback on, but also, the way we sliced up the clips and
Yeah,
how the video sort of moves with the audio. People quite liked that as well, and people were asking how I was doing it. And I said with a lot of difficulty after all the technical issues in the first one, because I think the first episode took about genuinely 24 hours to do because of all the issues we had, and then the second one took um, after recording it, it took a morning, so like 4 or 5. So it's a good improvement in terms of the post production, which I'm pretty happy with.
that's good. That's good to hear. And it's gonna get better and faster, as we move on and as we learn more. But I also like, your because it was your idea to present the podcast like that with the clips. And when I was in Spain, actually, we rented out a car and were driving alongside the coast, and then my girlfriend was like, "Hey, you did this podcast, right? Is it already on Spotify?" And I was like, "Yeah, it is." And she was like, "Can we fire it up in the car? I would like to listen to it." And I was like, I mean, she enjoyed listening to it. Of course, she did, because she's wonderful and supportive, and she actually enjoyed the content, but she also cares about NFTs. But for me, it was like so weird, to be in the car and listening to my own content. That felt kind of strange.
How long was the car journey, and did you listen to all of it?
We listened to about half of the podcast because then we arrived at our destination. But still, I don't know. It is a pretty special feeling, to be in the car and look at the display in front of you, and seeing the podcast on the display and everything displayed on Android car with Spotify. It was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, that's really funny. Um, yeah, that's good. I didn't need to listen to it separately because I think in the editing process,
Oh yeah,
I heard all of us say everything about 500 times. So
I think you know the
I,
first episode by heart by now, right?
yeah, probably, yeah. Um, so we were just going to start off by saying what we've been up to because we had a bit of a week off and some personal changes that we're both uh, going through, deciding on at the moment. Because obviously the space moves so fast all the time. 2 weeks is a long time not to be in touch. So, what were you up to in Spain? What was going on?
It is, and you mentioned the most important thing. Space moves so fast that sometimes I feel like I don't get the time that I need to, step aside and just think and reflect upon everything that's happening and reflect upon myself and what I wanted to do and, where I'm headed at in this space, despite doing that full time. Because I feel like, so not stuck is not the right word, but like so going with the flow and trying to be on top of everything that I don't have that personal time to reflect. And it was quite a spontaneous decision to take the week off, travel to Spain and give myself the time to reflect and do something positive for my mental health, and figuring out that I was like focused on way too many projects, doing way too much stuff, despite my own trading that I'm still doing with NFTs, obviously, but being involved in too many projects. And I thought, I wanted to have like one thing that I can focus on, kind of a North Star, right? In the long run. And with me thinking that the space is still so early, we have like, a couple of, 10,000, maybe 100,000 people that are really deep into NFTs and what's happening. That this is actually, the thing that I wanted to focus on, meaning creating content around it, educating on this space, and all this information that I'm, processing on a daily basis, trying to getting the best out of it, the most relevant out of it, and creating content around that, and focusing more on the podcast creation with you, on the media company with you, and make that my top priority.
Yeah, I think I completely sympathize with that feeling of running at 100 miles an hour in this space, and like there's just so many things that we're doing all the time. Because realistically, if you were to write our job description down, that it's just 10, 11, 12 very distinct different roles, and we are kind of stuck in, not again, you said the word stuck as well, but we're not stuck because we're moving, but
Yeah.
we're stuck in a state of constant perpetual movement. And so you don't get a chance to think whether the things that you're moving towards are the most useful opportunity for you to be moving towards. So yeah, I definitely sympathize with that. And sometimes it does take an amount of time to just walk away and reflect on, like, well, are these tasks actually moving me towards the objective, whatever that is? So I hear you on that. And I'm very glad that you think that this is a useful opportunity, because I completely agree in that media is firstly kind of lacking in the space. Like there's lots of stuff that gets done on Twitter, but I don't know if there's a concerted effort to produce on a bigger scale through different mediums. So yes, there's podcasts. Yes, I think there's more sort of podcasts and Twitter spaces, but just trying to up the production and up the regularity of the production and show consistency, I think is a huge opportunity, probably a decade-long opportunity, because the NFT collecting craze is something which we're the start of a trend which will last forever, in a way.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with this. And the issue that I've been having was the space. NFTs have been so beneficial to me over the course of the last 2.5 years, right? And I always felt like I wanted to build my own project, build something in this space as well, contribute to this space as well. And this is why I got involved with a couple of projects. And because this is what builders do. They have their own project, they get in a project, take it from there and build. And what I didn't realize at that time was that all this content creation, media creation, etc., is of course building as well. It is another form of building, but it is building and creating, and it is highly satisfying to do that. But because I was involved with working on so much stuff, I didn't realize that, and didn't realize that it feels very rewarding to do that, actually. And this is why I was like, because last episode I said, and sorry if my train of thought, because I'm still actively reflecting, is not the most straightforward. Because last episode I was like, it's so important to stay, to be involved with other projects, and to look around what's happening on your left and on your right. But what I learned was you don't have to be like highly actively involved in every project that you're interested about. You cannot build obviously with every project that you think is interesting, but by stepping back and being, the media creation part of it, you actually build with all those projects that you're talking about, and contribute positively to the space. And this was, the most important learning for me, I would say, over the course of the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think the thing about media, which people there's a lot of good stuff being done on Twitter Spaces, which is great for community and getting people through the door. But the main thing which I think media is helpful for is to exist and to live and to be interacted with when you are unable to be there. Like, we can post things and it then exists beyond us, right? Like, we can be
Yeah.
asleep and someone might be able to tune into a podcast or something from the other side of the world. And I think that's what's missing in a way. To double down on the media where you produce things that last. And I know lots of people write awesome Twitter threads. And this is one of the ways I started as well. I used to write long Twitter threads on various things, and it's great for
Mhm.
engagement and it gets people through the door, gets to know you. But then that thread, not only is it lost to everyone else, it's lost to me. Like, I've written a bunch of stuff and I wouldn't even know how to necessarily find it now, because Twitter is not good at indexing and storing the various good things that you do. So we need other forms of media to exist and to showcase what we've done. And I think if you're good in this space, or if you're talented and if you've been successful, one of the things I think is that, well, what do you have to show for that apart from the money in the bank account? Because that will
Yeah.
be there. But when you want to then show your expertise off to other people, you're not going to send a screenshot of, the amount of ETH you have in your wallet. I don't think you would anyway. And also, you're not just going to be able to send a screenshot. Okay, I hold this NFT. I've got a Moonbird. I've got a Bored Ape. I've got something. You want to be able to point towards something of significance. Like, okay, here are these 25 articles I've written over the last few weeks, or here are these 17 podcasts I've co-hosted on various interesting topics. Like, I think that's what's meaningful, and that's actually what I'm finding is helpful when I'm getting work from other people. I'm able to just send a screenshot or send the link to these my articles, actually, in particular at the moment, and so
Yeah.
people can actually see, okay, there's some substance behind all this stuff. There's been some commitment. Whereas I think it's harder to demonstrate that, and it's still not perfect for me to demonstrate it. But this is the point of the media: is to keep building up this online resume / portfolio of content for people to engage with and see, even when you yourself as an individual are not able to be there physically and to deliver it.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with that take. Besides
Cool.
that, how were your last 2 weeks? What's new on your end?
Yeah, all good. I'm moving flat very soon this week, which means that I I will finally be able to set up all this stuff, because it's been a real pain having to deliver various things from different places all the time. So I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to getting set up properly, and yeah, pumping out this quality, or doing our best to produce more quality stuff. So hopefully that will be slightly more convenient. Um, let's get into the NFT stuff, man. We've that's what we've been up to. Generally, there's some huge stuff that's happened last couple of weeks. The main thing probably was the Yuga land sale over the weekend. What was your experience of it? What's your take? We haven't spoken about it at all yet, even offline. So how did it go down for you? What did you feel about it?
It was, I mean, obviously it was pretty intense, especially from a European standpoint, staying up until 3 a.m., seeing the gas war going down, and um, seeing, all the content on Twitter and all the different opinions, and trying to get a feeling for what the community is also thinking, and all those smart threads. Like someone, I don't remember the name, unfortunately, made a thread pointing out that it was impossible for all the deeds to sell out within half an hour, because of the way the blockchain works and how many transactions you could fit in one single block, and how that would then again translate to increasing gas costs, and how accurately you would be able to predict the gas costs with how many people wanted to take part in the sale, and how all those technical details and how all that works. It was fascinating to read that in such great detail, especially after you experienced it yourself. It was one of my biggest gas wars. Not the biggest, I think, but still one of the most expensive mints. Reminded me of 2021. And I think the thing that was, and I tweeted about that, that fascinated me the most was that the sales volume, or the trading volume, to be more precise, in OpenSea surpassed Sandbox all-time trading volume after 2 days roughly. And
yeah, that's pretty crazy.
That was just crazy to see, how long Sandbox has been building and has shipped a functional beta, and has allowed to see so much of what you can do in Sandbox, and to then get a feeling, Yuga Labs being obviously earlier in the metaverse game, but the power that the brand already has, and despite it being a very expensive sale in terms of gas fees and in terms of the Ape coin valuation, if you bought Ape rather close to the sale, and then having all that traction in such a short amount of time, I didn't expect it to go that crazy on the secondary market to have a 150k ETH in 2 days. But this is also one.
So I'm looking at it right now. It's done 188,000
another
ETH.
Then another 40,000 ETH more,
which is I just did this calculation earlier. It's 563 million on the secondary market volume,
which is insane. Which
is absolutely insane, right?
Yeah.
I was speaking to, because how we've been speaking about how one of the things I'm doing is speaking to lawyers in the city to ask if they would like some talks about what the stuff that we are very well versed in and the things that we're finding out in this space. And one of my friends is a real estate lawyer in the city at a big American firm, and I was explaining. I think I don't know if I sent him this tweet or whether I didn't, but I was explaining the biggest land sale in digital history is happening this weekend, and I suspect no one in your legal team knows about it, which in a sense makes sense, right? Because people they do real estate, but at the same time, I think it should be on people's radars that if you were a real estate lawyer now, or if you were in real estate in general, whatever sector you're in, if you're in the real estate market, it would surely be of interest to know that these deeds have just done 500 million in secondary market volume.
Absolutely. And it also, be interesting for a real estate agency to think about if they didn't want to have a digital branch, because if you look at all those different trades, artifacts, codas, tiers of lands, and all the complexity, and with very little information that is obviously known up front, and you would have clients or someone who wanted to have an entry point into metaverses, have an entry point into the Otherside, it would be quite interesting to have a digital real estate agency for that. But it also puts a massive, that sales volume puts a massive pressure on Yuga Labs. The expectations, the hype in the community is so high. And this is not only Yuga Labs. This is for all projects that have a certain status, a certain amount of popularity. Their biggest danger is actually to deliver the product that they are promising to deliver. Because when it gets real and you have these expectations, and then you start thinking about the real money that you put in to get that land, and then you see the actual product, this is the most critical moment in a NFT project, in an NFT company's journey, when they release their actual product. So
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of the greatest risks at the moment is actually delivering a product, and I think Cool Cats found that out quite strongly when they tried to deliver on the game, and either it didn't. Well, it definitely didn't work at first. I don't know if it's now functioning now, but the delivery was very a very difficult moment in the market for them. What did you think about? So you mentioned actual delivery of stuff.
Yeah.
One of the questions I had, because I'm not super close to it, I'm not in the ecosystem. How much information is there out about this stuff, and is there sufficient information for people to even be trading this stuff? Like, what do the traits mean? Does the information exist, or has that just not been provided?
The information exists to a certain extent. A lot of it is speculation. A lot of it is, putting together intelligent assumptions and using some of the hints that Yuga Labs have been dropping. But I think with the different, rarities, with the different resources, and with the scarcity of those resources, that will be obviously beneficial to having them on your land. Um, and if you start to dig deep into floors for different resources and trading structure, I think you can have a competitive advantage and have many trading opportunities over the next couple of weeks or months. Because, and this is something that people need to understand. Like, if you look at timelines, PFPs move way faster than digital real estate and metaverses, because this is an actual product that takes way more time to build, way more time to be functional, has way more complexity in terms of transactions that need to be processed every second, every minute, etc. So you will have a longer amount of time where you can, leading up to the reveal of the game, where you can trade, where you can learn, get that information, and find out what people are looking for, and trying to make, intelligent hypotheses and assumptions around that. And I think with, studying the data and studying the information that's out there, there's enough to have a competitive advantage to um, make quite some smart purchases, aside from,
Interesting.
just buying the Coda floor, which is pretty damn expensive to do that. There's many
Hmm.
quote unquote cheaper plays on the cheaper lands to be done.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Like, I'm personally not. I'm not a huge fan of not knowing things. I know I know that the space often operates in a way which tries to limit the amount of information
Yeah.
out so that, you know, so that decisions are almost made without. I don't know. In some ways, maybe I think if you put something out with less information, do you think there's a world in which some of these details haven't been ironed out yet, and it's like depending on how people treat the different rarities and the different structures and whatever, then utility can be provided in that way. Because I think it would be a bit of a disaster if people decided, for example, I think this is a pretty obvious one, but it would be a bit of a disaster if people decided that the coda lands were worth more, which they obviously are, and then it turns out down the line that, oh no, it's actually just the same as the others, right? But there hasn't been utility information provided at this stage. So in a way, do you think people could sort of just put the information out there, see how people behave, and then amend the details later?
Yeah, this is a very good question. It is a very, tricky balance to find. Like, seeing the communication around Coda, it is pretty clear that they are special. It is pretty clear that they will play an important role, and this also reflects in the current floor prices for land with Coda. But as for the different kinds of resources, artifacts, etc., there is not that much information out there. So if someone would really, or something would really stand out in terms of trading behavior, and then people would be massively disappointed, I don't think that would happen. Which then again is not a free pass, to just follow any hypothesis that you read and buy that stuff because someone says it's good. But I get the need for, while I also personally like having all the information up front, who doesn't? I get the need for not doing that, because, as soon as something is absolutely clear and absolutely transparent, then someone will have a bot, someone will have a script for that, and just execute on that and find the best arbitrage opportunities and follow them.
Mm,
So I think the
yeah,
real alpha non for non-coding people, so to say, is in these murky fields where not all information are disclosed up front.
Yeah, I agree. Um, do you think we'll get regulated because of this? Like this huge, huge. I mean, I can't see how the lack of information from a legal perspective when I think about this stuff is just it's really crazy. It's a crazy, crazy behavior. I mean, to be honest, I was reflecting on this a little bit the other day, where the people who either minted Bored Apes or held them from a very early point in time. I was just reflecting, being like, these people are completely crazy. Like, completely well played. I have a ridiculous amount of respect and foresight on their part because of what they did by holding. But you have to, it's completely mental because there was no precedence to hold an NFT with an animal on it for that length of time, thinking that, okay, this companion drop is going to come and, I'll be able to sell that and make some money off that. Or, oh, yeah, the coin will drop and then I'll be like, that hadn't happened before. So they've set the precedence for all that stuff. And it's completely mental to me that people were able to do that. So in a way, I don't think it's a big deal that there's no information, because the game that we seem to be playing doesn't necessarily need to be a logical one. It might just be one which is uh, one of desire, culture, and the demonstration of wealth and exclusivity.
That's a very, very interesting take, and also going back to the question in terms of regulation. I think, if we look at this space right now, and if we're going to look at it in the next 5 years, regulation certainly will increase. That's for sure. There's like so many countries and the European Union and the US obviously working on many more regulatory frameworks on the one hand, and there's Gary Vee said in an interview, when you have a space that new and that innovative, you will see both the best and the worst in humans, and I absolutely agree with that take. But I I don't think it will be that easily possible to kind of regulate all that speculation and information dealing that's going around in the same way that it happens with stocks. Like I cannot see a future, maybe I'm completely wrong, where everyone sharing his hypothesis, investment thesis, or just rumors or crazy speculations on Twitter would be held accountable for that, because people would follow that person and make a purchase of an NFT based on that. And I don't know. Maybe we will see a future where there are regulated NFT projects that will have kind of a prospectus that they will issue before the token sale. But then again, if you think about this and then you see the JPEGs behind that, sounds a bit ridiculous. But I
Yeah, it would be weird, and no one would read it anyway. So what's the point?
It is indeed, and even with the Yugalhand sale, the terms and conditions and the Animoca brand part in that and everything is super, super complex. And obviously, there's been quite a couple of discussion points on that. What rights do you actually own? And they are apparently a bit different when there's a coda versus if you don't have a coda. And it's still not very clear how this plays out. And I know there's been a couple of discussions. Are you actually allowed to trade them on the secondary market? Yes or no? So even with a company that big who has the resources and put in the money to try to find a set of terms and conditions that tries to provide additional information and make that more clear, it's still probably didn't work out to that extent that they hoped it worked or it would work out. So while I think that there will be more regulation coming over the course of the next years, I don't think that we will be able to reach a level that compares to the stock market, and I also wouldn't think that it is necessary to do that.
Yeah, that's probably reasonable. One thing I did see though, which is not the first time I've seen this, and I'm pretty sure uh, it's not possible to do this, is someone made a point about one of the clauses in the license, and then I think, and I say I think, I haven't double checked or done any research, that obviously people should check this. I think that one of the founders then said, "Oh, like that shouldn't be there. I'm going to call the lawyer." I don't know if you saw that. Like, I'll speak to the lawyer and like we'll get rid of that clause or something. And this is not the first time I've seen this in the NFT
Yeah.
projects, where people sell stuff with terms and conditions attached, and then someone just says, "Oh, don't worry, like we're going to get rid of it after." It's like, you can't do that. You 100% can't issue things and then just take them away after. Um, and it also makes me question why are people not, like, A, because they'll be paying their lawyers a lot of money, 100%.
Yeah.
They'll be paying their lawyers a lot of money. So why have the lawyers not picked it up and done it as it was supposed to be? But B, if it's not supposed to be there, why hasn't someone in the company read it? Like, is anyone reading the docs? The lawyers aren't. The people in the company, well, maybe in a way, the people in the company are trusting the lawyers to do it as they like, but you still have someone in there who's going to read it. So that's one of the things I was thinking. But the other big question I wanted to ask was about the APE chain
Yeah.
and the hint towards that. What did you think about that? Because that is a big, it's a big move for Yuga to get involved in that type of infrastructure building. What did you think?
So obviously, this is me speculating. I had quite a couple of discussions on that, and thought a bit on that. On the one hand, the gas war, yes, you could have avoided it. There would have been different solutions using a marketplace as Nifty Gateway, as Tokapi, that also handled drops like Xcopy and had a massive amount of volume. Kodadan from Avagotchi suggested you basically could have mirrored the contract, have the NFTs on layer 1 and conduct the sale on layer 2, and then basically assign the NFTs on layer 1 to the people so that the land stays on mainnet and it's not on Polygon. You could use a platform such as a Premint to have such a massive sale going on without having the gas war. So the real question is, why gas war then? Was it planned like that so that, they can hint towards building Ape Chain? But then on the other hand, if you think about that, that doesn't make too much sense, because more than $100 million have been burnt in gas fees. And Yuga Labs said that they're going to refund people who missed out and refund them on their, on the gas that they spent. So this, poses the question, was it a quick reaction to be like, okay, hey, this was a massive, massive drop, and maybe we should have thought about building an ape chain, which then again doesn't make that much sense, right? Because it's a massive commitment to talk about building your own chain. And I think that this certainly is a discussion that has been that has took place at Yuga Labs over the last couple of months. If they go towards the metaverse route, and if they build this massive, massive ecosystem, and they will have partner projects, and that they won't rely on the apes only because they wanted, to expand their metaverse and expand their brand, obviously with all the partnerships that they have, that it would make sense to not have that on mainnet when it comes to the transaction frequency and the cost of having that. So the question is, are you big enough to build your own chain? And is this the best solution to do that? And it's difficult to answer that from a outside perspective. Axie Infinity did.
Yeah,
They built their own chain. They also built their own chain because they said they are building more games and they wanted to host other games. And if Yuga Labs thinks that they want to build this ecosystem and be, a platform that other brands can grow into and be able to interact and have that access on the chain, then it might make sense that they wanted to have their own chain. If it would just quote unquote only be limited to, their own metaverse that stays inside their own brand, I don't know if having an own chain is a requirement then.
interesting. So you think it might be the case that the brand expands by permitting others to come into the ecosystem? And I guess maybe, I mean, this is pure speculation based on what you just said, but like they've obviously bought the CryptoPunks IP and the Meebits IP. So whether or not they might be able to be integrated into something in this game slash chain. That's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, and the biggest risk, except all the technical things that go on with building your own chain, but just from a communication perspective, is to educate your people and help them being onboarded on the new chain, because people are still figuring out how Ethereum works, how mainnet works. And obviously Yuga Labs has a very, very high entry point in terms of cost, but if they wanted to build this to be a global brand, to be a global franchise, then we will see several new entry points down the line that will be more accessible for the masses to join the ecosystem. And if you start doing that on mainnet, and then you have to educate your people to move on to your new own native chain, that's a challenge. And I think that is a challenge that many projects who are not building on mainnet are currently facing. That 95%, I think it is, of the entire NFT trading volume on Ethereum is happening on mainnet. And trying to get your people, even like for the biggest projects like Avagotchi, to get them to Polygon, despite bridges and everything being super easy to use, well, poses a massive challenge. And one thing that Yuga Labs doesn't want to run into as an issue is losing that momentum, because people are like, no, this is getting out of hand, this is too complex. So if they build their own chain, they would also have to focus a lot on the UI and UX side of it. And of course they can do that, they have the resources and the budget to do that. But I think this would be another part of their thought train when it comes to the decision where they are headed to in the future.
Yeah, I think the sale marks an interesting turning point in the sales of NFTs, because on one level, NFT sales are a raise, where you raise money for the companies and do cool stuff. And up to this point, that has been cool stuff like merch, real life parties, events, online experiences. So it's been very cultural. Like, the point of holding an NFT has been very cultural. And if you hold a particular thing, you feel significant as you feel a part of that culture. I don't know if the feeling of holding the NFT feels as cool if if you think, well, the reason why I paid into this is to fund a chain. And I think that's it's sort of moving into the territory now where we're sort of funding a real building out of the infrastructure, which I don't know, I guess in some sense is completely reasonable, because like, well, if we want to build this bigger and make it better, that's what we need to do. But it feels like a step away from the real cultural element which we started with all of these purchases last year.
Yeah, and it's a bit of both, I think. Of course, it is a cultural element. It is part of being the community. But I also think if you have a certain PFP, you also feel like kind of an investor in that company, which is of course legally speaking not the correct term to use, but you feel like that. And with some projects, and especially with Yuga Labs, you get rewarded for that financially in a very, very handsome way. And I think these lines, they start to blur a bit. Is it part of the community, of the culture? Is it a financial investment that starts to kind of feel like having equity, and also being able to showcase, hey, I was the first to invest. Basically, I'm the the seed investment of this company, because I have the Bored Ape, I have the Mutant because I was a little bit later, or I have another deed now, or another land. So these lines will get very blurry, and this again goes back to the point that we've been discussing before, with regulation, and the challenges that regulations are going to face is to actually define what an NFT is in terms of an asset class, and which laws are applicable to that. There's, I think, a still ongoing lawsuit between a collector based in the UK, and Nifty Gateway, represented in New York. And I think they took quite a lot of time on the UK side to figure out, which customer protection laws are applicable, which asset class is this artwork. It was on NFT, on Nifty was an artwork, is applicable. And with projects getting more complex and Yuga Labs potentially moving to their own chain in the future, these lines will get even more blurry and on the one hand get more blurry, but on the other hand also, open up so much more room and so many more reasons to get into this ecosystem or in any ecosystem, because you could have like completely different backgrounds and reasons to get into that. You want to have the flex, you want to be part of a culture, you want to have access to the privileged information, you treat it as a financial investment, you feel like a mini VC who does that. So yeah, complexity will increase massively.
Yeah, I agree. It's there are many different reasons to buy the NFTs now, and I guess those could increase as we go forward. So speaking of culture, Artifact, who were bought out by Nike, dropped or finally revealed their monolith after I don't know how long. It was so long. It was too long for me. I had two monoliths which I'd bought off the secondary market, and I was holding. I bought two so that I would sell one and hold one, and it just took too long for me. Like, I appreciate I should have held and been patient, but it was just so long. But they revealed, and it was really cool what was inside. I don't know if you saw the reveal.
I did.
So it was like the first crypto kicks, I think they were called, the first Nike digital trainers, as well as a vial, which is used to customize your crypto kick, as well as another monolith, whose contents are still unknown. So I think that was a really cool thing. I think very, very immediately, very weirdly, the market reacted really negatively for 10 minutes maximum where it dropped, and then it ramped up again. So I think they did pretty well. It's been received very well. And I think my main takeaway with Artifact, after seeing them for a while now and I don't have any monoliths, but I have a couple of space pods and loot pods, I think, is that seeing what they did with CloneX and then the pods and then the loot pods and now this, they just get the game. Like, they understand this game of what NFT holders want. They understand how, they understand the timeframes of like what we look forward to, how to keep people's interest. And I think they just do a really, really good job of on multiple fronts, on the digital front, but also fusing that with real life stuff. They do a really good job of managing people's expectations and always giving something unexpected and going over the top. So I thought that was really cool.
And I feel like not a lot of big brands, care enough to understand the NFT space to that extent. I also feel like you mentioned Nike. I'm going to mention Adidas did a pretty good job on that. They opened up, the claiming window for the Into the Metaverse token that basically allows you to claim a beanie, a hoodie, and the tracksuit. And initially, we planned to have 3 drops spread out over the year, which would allow you to claim one individual item. And then they realized they actually wanted to focus more on what they call, the phase 2 and the phase 3 of the drop, being the metaverse-related content and the tokens turning into PFPs, turning into ERC 721 tokens. And then they said, okay, they're going to bundle all of that merch drop together and have it distributed on one date. And the claiming window opened for that, and it's still open until I think the 11th of May. And for me, it was interesting to see how the community will react to that. And the best reflection of the community, while it's not the most important thing, but it is the floor price, right? At first, there was like a discrepancy between like stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 2 being, already with the claimed merge, but now they're like super, super close together. And it's quite interesting to see if you bought in before the drop, you would have paid like 1.8 ETH or something to get that, be able to claim all the merch. And now, if you look at the difference in price, I think it's around 0.1 ETH between has merge to be claimed or already has claimed merge. And it shows you how much the merge is valued exactly at like 0.1 ETH,
Yeah, that's
which is quite in
interesting, isn't
line
it?
with the Adidas pricing if you would buy those items
Yeah,
individually. And that the major part of it is
yeah,
actually focused on being part of whatever Adidas plans are to join and enter the metaverse. And I didn't expect that to see such a small difference in floor prices between the two stages of the NFT, which ultimately is a reflection on the community's trust towards Adidas to deliver on the metaverse component and actually believing in this space and not being here for quick merge drop and then again leaving the space, right?
yeah. I think it shows how much of the value of these items are comprised of future imagination, like of future expected
Yeah,
value.
yeah,
It's like so much of the stuff we're like hoping for something else, and I think because I didn't actually know Adidas had made those changes. I'm not sure. I wasn't completely sold on their communication. Really, I think there was a bit of time where they were struggling with comms, but it's definitely something I think Artifact do really well, where you get a good sense of maybe because they're more crypto native, right? Like they've been in the space
yeah,
for
of
longer
course.
and they know how to do the comms in the Discord, and I think that does matter for this type of stuff. So yeah, I hope Adidas uh, is. I think that's definitely a good move to bundle the stuff, get the physical stuff out. That physical stuff wasn't enough for people to hold the NFT for the year, right? Like that's not sufficient. So going harder into the metaverse experiences or additional NFTs or profile pictures, I think that's
Exactly.
definitely the way to go for
And
them.
this is, as you mentioned, like
Uh,
so important, to focus on the community's needs, listen to them, being, willing to adapt your product, even change it like completely, um, and showing that you care about the space and that you want to learn, and also, think how, and you mentioned that, how to keep your community engaged and how to keep them wanting to still own the token. And this is something that I saw with, I've been obsessing a bit with the house ecosystem and MURI being one of the sub brands, so to say, in this ecosystem over the last days and weeks, really. And obviously, this is not, financial advice in any way. But I also find it interesting if a project shows that they have good strategies, interesting strategies to keep the community engaged and to, keep the holders wanting to hold their tokens, right? And for example, MURI, which is a anime profile picture project that did a snapshot for Night City, which is their metaverse for a land airdrop, they did a couple of interesting things there. So first of all, the snapshot was just to see who's a holder and to basically be eligible for the land airdrop. But there's going to be another snapshot just before the airdrop, and you need to hold it throughout both of the snapshots. Then, if you just have a land and you don't have your MURI, which is your PFP, you cannot enter the metaverse without an avatar. And then again, if you have multiple MURIs and you get multiple pieces of land, you're able to stack them, being one MURI or one piece of land represents one floor. And if you have 10, you can merge them together into a skyscraper, which I think will be the merging will be deflationary, which then would
hmm.
decrease the total supply of land. And seeing that train of thought and seeing that someone actually or a team actually thinks about how do I keep my holders engaged besides financial rewards, of course, because there's like so much more things that you can do. And because everyone knows, after a snapshot for a potential airdrop, floor prices dump, right? And trying to
Hmm.
avoid these kind of situations is something that's really important. I think that they do a pretty good job at that in a similar way as Artifact, Nike, and Adidas did.
Yeah, interesting. I'm not super familiar with this project, but I know you mentioned that it's something you've been looking into investing in a reasonable amount. What was it? What do you think was so? Because it's certainly not the same type of household name like the others, unless I'm completely out of the loop, which I might be because I don't trade as much as I used to. So what was it that was so innovative about it, or about them, that caught your attention,
Well,
basically?
what initially caught my attention was the team. Team is, I think, around 30 persons, quite interesting backgrounds, ex Netflix, ex Apple, Disney. I think the creative director of Kanye West's team who joined them, etc. And um, team, as we talked about last time, is basically what you're betting on. You're betting on the persons, you're betting on the team, and you're betting on the track record. And if they've, been able to execute on the things they promised to execute on the past, and as if you don't have a previous record on the blockchain, which is transparent for everyone, you have to, look at the quote unquote real life accomplishments that the person had or the team had. And this was, what got my initial attention, to see, okay, this is a highly accomplished team that got together. And um, in my analysis, when I get into NFT projects, I try to understand how much the team understands the community, the NFT ecosystem per se, and how they think about the long-term vision and the long-term incentives to build a community and incentivize holders to, hold on to their assets. Because besides Yuga Labs, all other companies that did an airdrop, I think, or not all other companies and all other NFT projects, but the majority, um, had reached or have reached a situation where, the initial asset was worth more than the asset post airdrop plus the airdrop that you received. And Yuga Labs
Mm,
obviously doesn't run into that issue because they are like such a massive brand and the number one project in the space. But most of the other projects do face that issue. And you have to think
mm,
about, your tokenomics. You have to think about the long-term incentives for holders that are non-financial, besides, promising to build a community and a brand, but actual mechanisms that make you keep the token because you get an experience, because they belong together, because the ecosystem is connected. And this was what I found to be very fascinating with House, which again is the overarching brand that not only includes the Muris, but also other sub brands that branch into digital and real fashion, into furniture, into gaming, into anime. That they try to connect these sub brands in such a way that they are like mutually beneficial to each other, and create a really intricate ecosystem and network. And this is something that I find fascinating, not only with that project, with other projects as well. With uh,
yeah, I think it's really important to. It's like a double. It's a two-pronged. Well, maybe it's probably more facets, but there's like the brand building side where it's just like pure desire, like I just want this thing. But then there's got to be some sort of smart incentives at
yeah,
play to make people do to
yeah,
hold, right, to make sure the things don't lose value. So I think that's really, really
yeah. If
important.
if I had to sum it up, it is those three things. It is the brand and community building. It is the technical architecture, the incentive structure, if you wanted to call it like that, and ultimately the team behind the company or behind the NFT project.
Yeah, that's a useful summary. I think that's super helpful. And it's funny that, I mean, I guess lots of people will hear people talk about community and brand and blah, 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 blah. And lots of people will think that NFTs are still, in their infancy and a bit of a joke, and think it's just pump and dumps and this and that. But there is a legitimate sort of framework by which people who are successful at trading this stuff analyze. It's like an investment thesis, right? Like an investment framework through which you analyze what to put your money into. Um, and it's legit. It's like these are real things, real thought processes that people go through. And I think it's super important to take note because um, there's just too much opportunity, as we've said
No,
before. I wanted to move towards the final thing now because we're running close to an hour, but we can go over a little bit, I guess. One of the things I mentioned earlier, like I got rid of my monoliths a while ago because I'd started to get concerned. This is still a concern that persists for me, to be honest. I'd started to get concerned about the macro environment, and I see lots of people on Twitter getting concerned about the macro environment, the sort of uh, the acceptance that we're going to go into a recession, almost certainly in Europe, but also elsewhere. Um, where do you sit on it? I don't know. I'm not an expert on the macro stuff. I'm just sort of gauging sentiment. What do you think about it at the moment?
I mean, prior to being in crypto, my background is in the world of finance and is in stocks, and I think on average, statistically speaking, we have some kind of crisis slash recession every 7 years, and there have been like so many strong years on the stock market that it's quote unquote almost time for a recession to happen, and we have very high levels of inflation currently. On the one hand, on the other hand, if you then again look into crypto and especially NFTs, the NFT ecosystem is still so small that it, on the one hand, it can be influenced very easily by what's happening in the real world and what by the way institutional investors act. And institutional investors who get into crypto or even get into NFTs is obviously the riskiest part of their asset allocation, right? And it's also the first investment in their asset allocation that they're gonna sell if things head into a recession, because they don't want to be in the most speculative asset classes in case a recession hits. In terms of looking at the macro environment and particularly the high level of inflation that we are facing right now, I think that the inflation will remain raised for quite a while, because if you look at inflation historically and what helps or not helps contributes to increasing inflation further is people being afraid of inflation and changing their consumer behavior. So being afraid, it's a vicious cycle of being afraid of an inflation that triggers even higher levels of inflation, and
Mm.
we need some kind of a breakout event to leave that mindset and get into a more used, a more normal level of inflation. And this certainly is incredibly difficult with the current macro economy, incredibly difficult with what's happening politically, with the global environment, with tensions, with the war. And I think with all that kind of instability, it will be a longer way until we get back into the growth mode, into the growth path of the global economy. But then on the other side, if you look at the global stock market ever since has been returning an average 7% per year, despite all of the wars, crises, recessions that occurred over the last decades. And I think ultimately it only really matters to you as an investor if you're focused on the short term, right? If you're a long-term investor and your investment horizon is spans across the next 10, 20, 30 years, and whether that's stocks and you're investing in the global stock market, or whether it's your investment thesis that crypto will change or it's already changing, obviously, the financial world and the financial system, whether your investment is that NFTs are here to stay and that they will collectively change how we collect stuff as human beings and attribute value to digital goods, then even if the macro environment is kind of troubling right now, one shouldn't really be worried too much about it, and trying to keep the focus on on the long perspective, on the long run.
Yeah. In a way, one of the things I wonder is whether we're because the ecosystem has taken a turn very recently where the barrier to entry has suddenly in the last few months got a lot higher. Like you can't participate in good drops anymore without thousands of dollars. Whereas there was, last year the average mint would have been like a 0.08, 0.07, sometimes less. And if I don't remember really even seeing like a 0.1, people would have thought that was expensive. And now, like, it's not really that entry price point isn't available for top projects. So one of the things I was wondering was, okay, fine, we're going to a big, broader recession where things get bad for various types of people. But we've also got these ape holders who are completely crazy enough to have held up to this point anyway, right? Like they've just held through all sorts of through uncertainty and that it's never happened before. And so a reasonable assumption of that could be, well, these people, I would hope, are playing with money that they can afford to have locked up. And so I wonder whether, because the barrier of entry has got higher, are people playing with money that they can afford to be locked up in a way that means even if we were to go into recession and there to be like a broader market meltdown, could NFTs potentially operate as normal because the people participating in the ecosystem are basically unaffected? It's like with the previous recession, where lots and lots of people did lose their jobs and it was very difficult for lots of people. But there's still a segment of society that, and actually, don't they say, like, often in the worst times, wealth inequality gets higher, right? Because the people at the top still don't end up losing money. Some of the stocks will go down, but in general, wealth inequality
Yeah.
increases. So I don't know. It was one of the things I was thinking, like, well, maybe we can operate as normal on the assumption that people are playing with money that they can afford to have locked up in these assets because, yeah, there's been so much wealth creation here anyway in the last year. Maybe that might be the case. I don't know.
If you look at the start of the pandemic and what stocks have done back at that time, and obviously there is digital companies who've been the big winners of the pandemic, but also looking at luxury companies such as LVMH, being Louis Vuitton, Moët Hennessy, they had a massive surge in stock price because people locked up at home who were wealthy before still remained wealthy and just had more time to purchase a ton of stuff. And this also holds true, like, to a certain extent for the NFT space, especially because you were talking about the Bored Apes who got like the companion drops, who got the ApeCoin as an airdrop, so who got multiple potential exit points to take at least a bit of profits, right? That allows them to be comfortable with not having to sell their main asset, not having to sell their ape or the mutant. And this also holds true for a couple of other projects, but I don't think it holds true for people who, have a massive amount of their net worth locked in a single NFT. If you have multiple NFTs,
Yeah,
or
I
if you have
agree.
multiple NFTs, in the same ecosystem, and you had the chance to take profits, or you still can take profits, and taking profits is a very important, part of the game, then you probably, be less affected by what's going on the macro level. And especially if, floors start to dump in terms of dollar prices, ETH price tends to counteract that. And I think we as a community are moving towards, pricing stuff more natively in ETH than in dollars. So I think that there is like a certain, mm, you know, stability. Maybe it's not really the right word to use, but still, um, a very protected environment from outside influences, despite being very volatile. If that makes sense.
Yeah, to be fair, when I'm making these points, and I think you mean the same, it's like this is at the top end of the quality stuff. Like, I think that everything else would get completely wrecked, to be
Yeah,
very,
and
very clear.
it has been wrecked.
Like,
Like if you
if
look at the floor prices, and I know floor prices is not are not the best indicator of a quality of a project, but it is, you know, an indicator we use on a daily basis. And if you look at the blue chip projects who've been increasing in terms of floor prices over the last months, and if you look at the quote unquote mid range, who I think lost around 50, 60-ish% in value on average, um, we're certainly seeing a massive consolidation towards blue chip projects. Yeah. And going
mm,
back to your point
yeah,
with, you
that's
know,
interesting.
the entry costs being higher and higher, that is true. But what's also increasingly difficult is there are projects that have, you know, um, affordable, accessible mint price. I think the house modules that I mentioned before started minting at 0.02, so very very cheap in terms of, you know, the average mint price. But good luck finding that project when it mints. Like I got in
Mm,
at way above an ETH, so at a 50 or 60x of the mint price. And if you put it like that, that
mm,
again sounds crazy, right? But it certainly is becoming increasingly difficult for new people to join the space on a limited budget. Yeah.
yeah, I agree. It's interesting to consider. I think it's really important every now and again to consider this macro environment because as much as we like you could be as bullish as anyone, and I think we all are on the trend of digital ownership and the trend of people, more and more people wanting to collect NFTs. But if inflation gets out of hand, if certain things happen to the dollar, if even if the ETH value, certain things go on there, which people are expecting it to run as we go
Yeah.
into the merge. If that gets out of hand, then you could end up losing in ETH terms on your investments. Like there are all sorts of other factors which we need to keep weighing up. So I think it's really important to have that conversation
It
every now
is,
and
and
again.
you know, asking yourself the question what your investment horizon is on the assets that you're holding. Is it short term? Is it mid term? Or is it really long term? Are you comfortable with holding that asset over the next couple of years because you believe in the vision, in the team, in the company, in their execution, etc.? And if you don't, and you see a troubled global macro environment, then it might be a good time to take profits, right? Or
Yeah, that makes sense.
reassess and restructure your portfolio.
Indeed, indeed. Okay, legendary. This was a good chat. We've gone more than an hour, probably more than we planned, but that was good
Absolutely,
stuff,
man.
man.
Thank you. Thank you
Good
so
stuff.
much.
All right, let's wrap it up there, and we will catch up again soon.
See you next time.
Take care, man. See ya.